My name is Sarah Mitchell, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew what family meant. I was wrong, dead wrong. It was a cold Tuesday morning in October when everything fell apart. The autumn leaves in suburban Denver were turning that brilliant orange-red that tourists love to photograph, crunching under my feet as I walked up the familiar stone pathway. The same pathway I'd been walking up for family dinners every Sunday for the past 8 years. The same pathway where I'd taught my nieces to ride their bikes, where I'd helped carry groceries, where I'd rushed with medicine when someone was sick. I had exciting news to share. After months of job interviews, rejection letters, and sleepless nights wondering if I'd ever find my place in the world, I'd finally landed my dream position as a marketing director at a tech startup downtown. At 32, after years of feeling like I was drifting through life, I felt like everything was finally coming together. The salary was double what I'd been making at my previous job, the work was creative and challenging, and for the first time in years, I could see a real future ahead of me. I couldn't wait to tell Emma and the rest of the family. I'd even stopped at her favorite bakery downtown to pick up those expensive French pastries she loved but never bought for herself. Emma had always been the practical one, the one who bought store-brand everything and clipped coupons religiously. I wanted to celebrate with something special. The front door was unlocked, as always. Emma's house had this warm, lived-in feeling that made everyone feel welcome the moment they stepped inside. The walls were painted in soft, warm colors, sage green in the hallway, butter yellow in the kitchen. Family photos lined every available surface, creating a visual timeline of our lives together. Pictures of our parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, who died in a car accident 5 years earlier on a rainy night just like this one. Photos of Emma's wedding to her husband Mark 12 years ago, where I'd been the maid of honor in a lavender dress that I still had hanging in my closet. Pictures of their twin daughters, Lily and Rose, now 15 years old and beautiful in that awkward, gangly way that teenage girls are beautiful. I found them all gathered in the kitchen around the large oak table that had belonged to our grandmother. It was the same table where I'd helped the girls with countless homework assignments, where we'd played board games during family game nights, where I'd sat with Emma during her difficult nights after our parents died, both of us crying into cups of chamomile tea. Emma was there, her auburn hair pulled back in the messy bun she always wore when she was stressed. Mark sat beside her, his usually friendly face unusually serious. The twins were there too, Lily picking at her nail polish in that nervous way she'd had since she was little, Rose staring at her phone with the intense focus teenagers reserve for avoiding uncomfortable situations. Even our Aunt Carol was there, and she rarely visited anymore since moving to the assisted living facility across town. The atmosphere felt strange, heavy with a tension I couldn't identify. It reminded me of the way the air feels right before a thunderstorm, electric and oppressive. "Hey everyone," I called out cheerfully, setting down the pink bakery box with its elegant ribbon. "Guess what? I got the job. The marketing director position at TechFlow. Can you believe it?" The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't the excited congratulations I'd expected, the hugs and cheers that usually greeted good news in our family. Instead, they all looked at each other with expressions I couldn't read. Emma wouldn't meet my eyes. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the wood creaking under his movement. The twins looked confused, glancing between their parents and me like they were watching a tennis match they didn't understand. "Sarah," Emma finally spoke, her voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. It was a tone I didn't recognize, formal and distant. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped like I was on a roller coaster. "What's wrong? Did something happen? Is someone sick?" Emma stood up slowly, crossing her arms across her chest in a defensive posture. She looked so much like our mother in that moment. The same auburn hair, the same green eyes, the same way of holding her shoulders when she was about to deliver bad news. But there was something in her expression that our mother never would have worn. Something cruel and calculating. "We've been talking as a family," she began, emphasizing the word family in a way that made my skin crawl and my heart start racing. "And we've decided that it's time for you to step back." "Step back from what?" I asked, genuinely confused. My mind was racing, trying to understand what I could have done wrong, what I could have said or failed to say. From us, from family gatherings, from being so involved in our lives. Emma's words hit me like physical blows, each one landing with precision and intent. You're 32, Sarah. You don't have your own family. You don't have kids. You don't have a husband or a serious boyfriend. You keep inserting yourself into our family dynamic, and it's becoming uncomfortable. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me dizzy and confused. I don't understand. I'm your sister. Half-sister, Mark corrected, his voice sharp and cutting. It was the first time anyone had ever made that distinction in our family. Ever. Our father had married Emma's mother when Emma was 3, and then they'd had me 2 years later. We'd grown up as full sisters, never acknowledging any difference, never making that distinction. We'd shared bedrooms, clothes, secrets, dreams. The word half had never existed in our vocabulary. Mark, I whispered, feeling betrayed by someone I'd considered a brother for over a decade. He'd been the one to walk me down the aisle at my college friend's wedding when I was a bridesmaid. He'd been the one to help me move apartments, to fix my car when it broke down, to give me advice about men who weren't worth my time. He's right, Emma continued relentlessly. You've been using us as a substitute for having your own life. Always here for dinner, always offering to babysit the girls, always trying to be part of decisions that aren't yours to make. It's not healthy, Sarah, for any of us. Aunt Carol, our mother's sister, nodded in agreement, like a judge pronouncing sentence. Emma called me because she was concerned about your attachment to their family. Sometimes people who don't have their own families can become too dependent on others. It's a form of emotional parasitism. Emotional parasitism. The clinical term felt like a slap across the face. The words felt like a physical assault. I looked at Lily and Rose, these girls I'd helped raise from babies. I'd been in the delivery room when they were born, had held them when they were minutes old. I'd changed their diapers, taught them to read, driven them to dance recitals and soccer games when Emma and Mark couldn't. I'd been there for their first steps, their first words, their first heartbreaks. They looked uncomfortable but didn't speak up for me, didn't protest this character assassination of the aunt who'd been a constant presence in their lives. I thought we were close, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. We are, Emma said, but her tone suggested otherwise. But this dynamic isn't working anymore. You need to focus on building your own life instead of living vicariously through ours. You need to find your own husband, have your own children, create your own family traditions instead of inserting yourself into ours. The bakery box felt heavy in my hands suddenly, the ribbon cutting into my fingers. The job news I'd been so excited to share seemed meaningless now, insignificant in the face of this family intervention that felt more like an execution. So, what are you saying exactly? I asked, needing to hear the words clearly, needing to understand the full scope of my banishment. We think it would be best if you didn't come to family dinners anymore, Emma said, still not meeting my eyes. At least for a while. You need space to figure out your own path, to build your own life. We're enabling your dependence by always including you. You're uninviting me from family dinners? The words sounded surreal coming out of my mouth, like I was speaking a foreign language. It's for the best, Mark added, his voice firm. For everyone, including you. I looked around the room at these people I'd considered my closest family, my support system, my anchor in the world since our parents died. They all avoided my gaze, except for Aunt Carol, who looked at me with what I could only describe as pity, mixed with clinical interest, like I was a fascinating case study in dysfunction. I see, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. And if I have my own family news to share, like getting a new job that I've been working toward for months, you can call, Emma said dismissively, waving her hand like she was shooing away a fly. Or text. We'll stay in touch. The dismissal in her voice, the casual way she reduced our relationship to occasional phone calls and text messages, broke something inside me that I didn't even know could break. I'd spent years being the fun aunt, the reliable sister, the one who showed up for every birthday party, every school play, every family crisis. When our parents died in that horrible accident, Emma and I had clung to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. I thought we'd grown closer, not further apart. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I understand the message loud and clear. I turned to leave, but Emma's voice stopped me at the doorway. Sarah, we're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to help you grow up. This is what tough love looks like. I didn't turn around. I couldn't let them see the tears that were already starting to fall. couldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing how completely they'd destroyed me. I got the message loud and clear. As I drove home to my apartment across town, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my mind raced with questions and self-doubt. How had I missed the signs? Had I really been that intrusive, that dependent, that pathetic? I thought about all the Sunday dinners, all the times I'd offered to help with the girls, all the family vacations where I'd been included. Had they been tolerating me out of pity all along? The more I thought about it, the more their words seemed to echo with a strange, rehearsed quality, as if they'd practiced this conversation multiple times. The way they'd all been gathered there, the way Aunt Carol had been ready with her clinical terminology, the way even the twins seemed to know what was coming. It all felt orchestrated. Back in my small one-bedroom apartment, I looked around at the photos on my bookshelf with new eyes. So many pictures with Emma's family, pictures from the beach vacation we'd taken last summer, where I'd paid for half the rental house, photos from the girls' birthday parties, where I'd spent hours decorating and hundreds of dollars on presents, holiday pictures where I was always there, always included, always smiling. Had I really been living vicariously through them? Or had I just been family? That night, I called my best friend from college, Jessica, who lived in Portland and had always been brutally honest with me. They said what? Jessica's voice was incredulous, rising to nearly a shout. Sarah, that's absolutely insane. You're literally the most independent person I know. You have your own career, your own apartment, your own interests, your own friends. Maybe they're right, I said, still reeling from the afternoon's ambush. Maybe I was too involved in their lives. Maybe I was using them as a substitute for having my own family. Involved in what? Being a good sister and aunt? There's something seriously off about this, Sarah. Emma's never said anything like this before, has she? In all the years I've known you, she's never complained about you being around too much. She was right. In all our years together, through good times and bad, Emma had never complained about my presence in her family. If anything, she'd always seemed grateful for my help and support. She'd been the one to ask me to babysit when she and Mark wanted date nights. She'd been the one to invite me on family vacations. She'd been the one to call me when she needed someone to talk to. There's something else going on here, Jessica continued, her voice taking on the analytical tone she used in her job as a social worker. People don't just flip a switch like this without a reason. And the timing seems suspicious. Right when you get good news about your job, they decide you're too dependent. That doesn't add up. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and tried to make sense of what had happened. The more I thought about it, the more questions arose. Why now? Why so suddenly? Why had they needed Aunt Carol there for backup, like they were conducting some kind of professional intervention? And why did their explanation feel so hollow, so constructed? I made a decision that night, sitting alone in my apartment with the untouched bakery box on my kitchen counter. If they wanted me to focus on my own life, that's exactly what I would do. I'd prove to them, and to myself, that I wasn't the pathetic, dependent person they'd painted me as. But I was also going to find out what was really behind this sudden, brutal rejection. Little did I know that the truth would be far more shocking than anything I could have imagined, and that the family secrets I was about to uncover would change everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, and my place in the world. 3 weeks passed without a single word from Emma or her family. Not a phone call, not a text message, not even a response to the careful, diplomatic email I'd sent, thanking them for their feedback and letting them know I was taking time to reflect on their concerns. The silence was deafening and absolute, like I'd been erased from their lives completely. I threw myself into my new job with the intensity of someone trying to outrun their own thoughts. I was the first one in the office every morning and the last one to leave every night. I volunteered for every project, every committee, every extra assignment that came my way. If they thought I didn't have a life of my own, I'd prove them wrong by building the most impressive professional life imaginable. But the hurt lingered like a physical ache. Every Sunday at 6 p.m., when I would normally be sitting around Emma's dinner table listening to Lily complain about her chemistry teacher and Rose talk about her latest crush, I felt the emptiness acutely. I tried filling those Sunday evenings with other activities: gym sessions, meal prep, organizing my apartment, even volunteering at the local animal shelter. Nothing worked. The absence of family felt like a missing limb. I found myself driving past their house sometimes, just to see the warm light spilling from their windows, to imagine the family gatherings continuing without me. I'd park across the street and watch through the kitchen window as they moved around inside, living their lives, probably not thinking about me at all. It was pathetic, I knew, but I couldn't seem to stop myself. It was during this time of forced independence that I made a discovery that would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my life, and my place in the world. I was organizing my bedroom closet on a rainy Saturday afternoon, something I did when I needed to keep my hands busy and my mind occupied. There's something therapeutic about creating order from chaos, about having control over at least one small corner of your life when everything else feels uncertain. That's when I found the box I'd forgotten about, shoved way back in the corner behind winter coats I never wore and formal dresses from events I'd rather forget. It was a medium-sized cardboard file box labeled Dad's Papers in my mother's careful handwriting. The sight of those familiar letters, formed by a hand that would never write again, made my chest tight with grief that still felt fresh even after 5 years. After our parents died in that horrible accident, a drunk driver who ran a red light and changed our lives forever in the space of a heartbeat, Emma and I had spent weeks going through their belongings. It had been one of the most difficult things I'd ever had to do, sorting through a lifetime of memories and deciding what to keep and what to let go. We'd divided their possessions carefully and fairly, each taking things that held special meaning. I'd taken the box of important documents, meaning to go through them when I was emotionally ready. 5 years later, I'd never opened it. Every time I'd seen it during apartment moves or closet cleanings, I told myself I'd deal with it later, when it hurt less, when I was stronger. That Saturday afternoon, with rain pattering against my apartment windows and nothing but empty hours stretching ahead of me, I finally decided to face the contents. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect from a lifetime of responsible adulting. Insurance papers with policy numbers and beneficiary information, tax returns dating back decades, medical records, warranties for appliances they no longer owned. Each document was a small piece of my parents' lives, carefully filed and organized with the same attention to detail my father had brought to everything he did. But at the bottom of the box, in a manila envelope marked real estate in Dad's distinctive handwriting, I found something that made my blood run cold and my hands shake so badly I nearly dropped the papers. A deed, a property deed for 1247 Maple Street, Emma's address, dated 15 years ago, just after she and Mark had gotten married and moved into what I'd always thought was their first home. The buyer's name on the deed wasn't Emma Mitchell Thompson or Mark Thompson. It was Sarah Emma Mitchell. My name, my full legal name, including the middle name Emma that I'd been given in honor of my big sister, the person who'd just told me I wasn't really family. I read the document 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding something, certain there had to be some mistake. But there it was, clear as day in legal language that left no room for interpretation. My father had purchased Emma's house 15 years ago for $285,000 and immediately transferred ownership to me. I would have been 17 at the time, just starting my senior year of high school, worried about college applications and prom dresses, completely oblivious to major real estate transactions being conducted in my name. My hands shook as I searched through the rest of the envelope with growing disbelief. There were mortgage payment records, all made by my father from his business account, all for a house that was legally mine. Property tax records spanning 15 years, all listing me as the owner. Insurance documents with my name as the policyholder, though I'd never seen a single bill or payment notice. How was this possible? How had I lived for 15 years without knowing I owned property? How had I never received tax bills or insurance notices or any of the paperwork that comes with home ownership? I grabbed my laptop with trembling fingers and started researching everything I could find about Colorado property law, deed transfers, property ownership, and real estate transactions. What I learned over the next several hours made my head spin and my stomach churn. According to everything I could find, I was the legal owner of the house Emma had been living in for 15 years. The house where she'd raised her daughters, where she'd hosted countless family dinners, where she'd built her life with Mark. The house where I'd been a welcome guest for years until 3 weeks ago. The house she'd just banned me from entering. The irony was so bitter I could taste it. I called Jessica immediately, not caring that it was past midnight on the West Coast. "You need to talk to a lawyer," she said, after I'd explained everything in a rush of words and barely controlled panic. Like, "First thing Monday morning. This is huge, Sarah. But what if there's an explanation? What if my dad meant to transfer it to Emma and just never got around to it before the accident? Then why didn't Emma know about it? Why didn't she ever mention that your father was paying the mortgage on her house? And why?" Jessica's voice took on a sharper edge. "Did she just happen to kick you out of the family right before you might have discovered this?" That question haunted me through a sleepless night. Emma had never mentioned Dad helping with the house payments. In fact, I remembered countless conversations over the years where she and Mark had talked about their mortgage payments, complained about interest rates, celebrated when they'd finally paid off what they thought was their loan early. Except, according to these documents, they'd never had a mortgage at all. Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time since starting my new job and spent the day at the Jefferson County Recorder's office downtown. The clerk, a patient woman named Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd probably dealt with confused property owners before, helped me pull all the records related to 1247 Maple Street. "This is quite unusual," she said, studying the documents with professional interest. "Your father purchased this property and immediately deeded it to you through what looks like a quitclaim deed. It appears it was meant to be held in some kind of informal trust arrangement until you reach the age of majority. But there's no record of any formal trust documents being filed with the court." What does that mean exactly? It means that technically, you became the legal owner when the deed was filed, regardless of your age at the time. The house has been yours for 15 years, and you've had all the rights and responsibilities of ownership this entire time. I felt dizzy and had to sit down in one of the plastic chairs beside her desk. "But my sister has been living there, paying what she thought was her mortgage. Has she been paying you rent?" "No, I didn't even know I owned it until Saturday." Mrs. Rodriguez looked genuinely concerned. "You might want to consult with a real estate attorney. This is a very complex situation with potentially serious legal and financial implications for everyone involved." That afternoon, I met with David Chen, a real estate attorney whose office was in a sleek downtown building. His credentials covered one wall of his office, and his desk was covered with the kind of organized chaos that suggested both competence and a busy practice. He reviewed all the documents I'd brought, occasionally making notes or pulling up information on his computer. "This is highly unusual," he said finally, adjusting his glasses and leaning back in his leather chair. "Your father essentially gave you a house without telling you about it, and someone else has been living in it and maintaining it for 15 years without any formal rental agreement or acknowledgement of your ownership. Maybe he meant to tell me when I turned 21. It's certainly possible. Many parents make financial arrangements for their children that they plan to explain later. But legally, you've been the owner all along. The bigger issue is that someone has been living in your property and potentially making improvements to it without your knowledge or formal consent. Someone being my sister and her family." He nodded sympathetically. "Family real estate disputes are always complicated emotionally, but they're also some of the most legally complex cases we handle. What do you want to do with this information?" That was the million-dollar question, literally. What did I want to do? Part of me wanted to march over to Emma's house, my house, and demand an explanation for 15 years of deception. But another part of me wondered if this discovery was exactly what Jessica had suspected, the real reason behind Emma's sudden and brutal rejection of me. "Mr. Chen," I said slowly, formulating a question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. "Is it possible that Emma knows about this? That she's always known the house was in my name?" He leaned forward, his expression grave. "That would certainly explain the timing of your family conflict. If she's been aware that she's living in your house without your knowledge, she might be concerned about complications arising." Complications? That was certainly one way to put it. What kind of complications could arise? Well, as the legal owner, you have significant rights. You could theoretically ask them to vacate the property. You could charge fair market rent for the past 15 years. You could sell the house. You could move in yourself and ask them to leave. The fact that you didn't know you owned it doesn't diminish your legal rights as the property owner. The room felt like it was spinning. I'd gone from being the unwanted sister, the emotional parasite who didn't belong anywhere, to being the person who literally owned the roof over Emma's head and everything under it. "There's something else you should be aware of," David continued, consulting another document. According to the property tax records, someone has been paying the taxes on this house every year. Do you know who that might be? I shook my head. I'd never received property tax bills, never even thought about property taxes. We should find out, because if your sister has been paying taxes on a property she doesn't legally own, that creates additional complications. There are laws about adverse possession and tenant rights that could come into play. As I left David's office, my mind was reeling with questions and possibilities I'd never imagined. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about Emma's life, about my own place in the world, was suddenly open to question. But more than that, I was starting to understand why Emma might have wanted me out of the picture so suddenly and so completely. If she knew about the deed, if she'd always known that she was living in my house, then my presence at family dinners wasn't just uncomfortable. It was a constant reminder of a secret she'd been keeping for 15 years. A secret that could destroy the life she'd built, the family she'd raised, the security she'd thought was hers. The question was, what other secrets was she keeping? And how far would she go to protect them? I spent 3 sleepless nights pacing my apartment, going over the documents again and again, trying to understand how my entire family dynamic had been built on a lie I didn't even know existed. The deed felt like it was burning a hole in my hands every time I picked it up. My house, my property, my family living there for 15 years without my knowledge. Part of me wanted to pretend I'd never found the deed, to let Emma keep living her life in the house that was technically mine, and try to rebuild our relationship from this new understanding. The bigger part of me, the part that was still raw and hurting from being rejected and called an emotional parasite, wanted answers. I wanted to understand how this had happened, why no one had told me, and whether Emma's sudden decision to push me out of the family was connected to this secret. On Thursday evening, I drove to Emma's house. The irony of the phrase wasn't lost on me anymore. It wasn't Emma's house at all. It was mine. The thought still felt surreal, like something from a dream or a legal thriller, not something that could happen in real life to real people. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching the warm light spill from the windows, seeing the silhouettes of Emma's family moving around inside. Mark was probably helping the girls with homework at the kitchen table. Emma was probably starting dinner, moving efficiently around the kitchen I now knew belonged to me. This was their home in every way that mattered. They'd lived here for 15 years, raised their children here, built their memories here, created their life here. But legally, technically, officially, it was my house. They were living in my house. Finally, I gathered my courage and walked to the front door. I knocked instead of using my usual casual entrance because I wasn't sure what my status was anymore. Was I family? Was I a stranger? Was I a landlord they didn't know they had? Emma answered the door quickly, and I could see the surprise and discomfort in her eyes immediately. She was wearing the same apron she'd had for years, the one with strawberries on it that the girls had given her for Mother's Day when they were 10. "Sarah? What are you doing here? We need to talk." I thought we'd established some boundaries. "About the house, Emma. We need to talk about the house." The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. For a moment, she just stood there frozen, her hand gripping the doorframe so tightly, her knuckles were white. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do." She looked over her shoulder toward the kitchen, where I could hear Mark's voice explaining something to one of the girls, probably helping with math homework the way he'd helped me years ago when I was struggling with calculus. "The girls are doing homework," she said, stepping outside and closing the door behind her. "Let's walk." We walked down the street in silence, the autumn air crisp around us. Emma's hands were shoved deep in her jacket pockets, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. The neighborhood was quiet, just the sound of our footsteps on the sidewalk and the distant noise of traffic from the main road. "How long have you known?" I asked finally when we reached the corner. "Known what?" "Emma, please, don't insult my intelligence. How long have you known that the house is in my name?" She stopped walking so abruptly I almost ran into her. In the glow of a streetlight, I could see tears forming in her eyes, making them look glassy and vulnerable. "Since the beginning," she whispered, her voice so quiet I almost couldn't hear her. The admission hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd suspected it. 15 years? You've known for 15 years that you've been living in my house? It's not that simple. Then explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my father bought you a house, put it in my name for some reason, and you've been pretending it was yours ever since. Emma started walking again, her pace quick and agitated, like she was trying to outrun the conversation. Dad called me the day before he bought it. He said he wanted to help Mark and me get started, but he didn't want it to look like he was playing favorites between us. He said he was going to put it in your name as a kind of insurance policy. Insurance policy for what? In case something happened to him and Mom. Her voice was getting shaky, and I could tell she was fighting back tears. He said if anything ever happened, at least you'd have property, something of value. He said you were the one who'd need it most because you were younger, because you wouldn't have someone to take care of you like I had Mark. The irony of those words, given our recent conversation about my supposed dependency, wasn't lost on me. According to Dad's logic, I was the one who needed taking care of, not the one doing the taking. But why didn't anyone tell me? Dad said he would when you graduated college. He wanted you to focus on your education, not worry about property ownership or rental income or any of that stuff. But then, her voice broke completely. Then they died, and I was 26 years old with twin babies and a husband who'd just lost his job in the recession. We were drowning in debt, and suddenly I'm living in a house that doesn't belong to me, that belongs to my grieving 17-year-old sister. What was I supposed to do? Kick my family out and make you deal with a house you didn't even know you owned? We'd reached the end of the block and the small park where I'd pushed Lily and Rose on swings when they were little. Emma turned to face me, her cheeks wet with tears. I was 26 years old with 2 babies and no money, Sarah. Mark was out of work for 8 months. We had nothing. And here was this house, this beautiful house that your dad had given us to help us get started in life. I told myself I was protecting you by not telling you, by handling all the responsibilities myself. You were supposed to tell me the truth. When? When you were 18 and starting college? When you were 21 and struggling to find your first job? When you were 25 and finally getting your life together? When you were 30 and dealing with your own problems? She was crying harder now, the words coming out in a rush. There was never a right time, Sarah. And the longer I waited, the harder it got. How do you tell someone that you've been living in their house for a decade without them knowing? I could hear the pain in her voice, but I also heard something else. Justification. She was explaining her actions, but she wasn't apologizing for them. What about the mortgage payments, the property taxes, all the bills that should have been coming to me? I've been paying everything, she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, all the improvements. We put in a new roof 3 years ago, $23,000. We renovated the kitchen, $45,000. We finished the basement, updated the electrical, replaced the HVAC system. We've put over $100,000 into that house. Into my house. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Yes, into your house. We stood there in the cold under the streetlight, the weight of 15 years of deception hanging between us like a physical thing. Is this why you pushed me away? I asked. Because you were afraid I'd find out? Emma was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and ashamed. Partly, she finally admitted. You were around so much, so involved in our lives. I kept thinking that somehow you'd figure it out, that you'd see a piece of mail or overhear a phone conversation or find a document. Every time you offered to help with household stuff, every time you talked about home repairs or property values, I panicked inside. And I also, she paused, struggling with words that clearly didn't want to come out. I also resented it sometimes. Resented what? The way you could just float in and out of our lives without any real responsibility. You gotta be the fun aunt, the one who shows up with presents and takes the girls to movies and doesn't have to worry about mortgages or school districts or property taxes or any of the real stuff that comes with home ownership. You got to enjoy all the benefits of family without any of the burdens. Her words stung because there was a grain of truth in them, but they also ignored the bigger truth that was staring us both in the face. Emma, it was my house. If I'd known, maybe I would have made different choices. Maybe I would have lived there too, helped raise the girls, been more than just the fun aunt. Maybe I would have been a real part of the family instead of just a visitor who you could dismiss whenever it became convenient. You were a real part of the family. Was I? Because 3 weeks ago, you told me I wasn't family at all. You called me a half-sister and told me I was too dependent on your family. Your family, Emma. Living in my house. She looked stricken, like she was seeing the full scope of her hypocrisy for the first time. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it then? I was scared, Sarah. Terrified. The words came out in a rush now, like a dam bursting. Mark has been asking questions about the deed lately. He found some old papers in the basement when he was looking for Christmas decorations last month, and he started wondering why we never got copies of our mortgage documents from the bank. He's been talking about refinancing to get a better rate, and I kept making excuses about why we couldn't. The pieces were starting to fall into place, so you decided to hurt me first. I thought if you weren't around as much, it would buy me time to figure out what to do. Maybe I could find a way to transfer the deed properly, or at least tell Mark the truth without destroying our marriage. She was sobbing now, her words barely coherent. I panicked, and I know that's not an excuse, but I didn't know what else to do. So you decided to destroy our relationship instead. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to protect my family. I am your family. The words came out louder than I'd intended, echoing down the quiet street and probably waking up half the neighborhood. Or I was, until you decided I wasn't. Emma started crying harder, the kind of ugly crying that comes from years of suppressed guilt and fear. I know I messed up. I've been carrying this secret for so long, and it just got bigger and bigger until I didn't know how to tell the truth anymore. Every year that passed made it worse. Every family dinner, every holiday, every time you helped with the girls or fixed something in the house, I felt like such a fraud. The truth, Emma, you've been living a lie for 15 years. You've been raising your children in a house that doesn't belong to you, making decisions about property that isn't yours, and pushing away the person who actually owns it. So what now? She asked, her voice small and defeated. Are you going to kick us out? Sell the house? Sue me for back rent? Destroy my marriage and traumatize my children? The questions hung in the air between us, heavy with implication and consequence. I realized that I had power in this situation that I'd never asked for and wasn't sure I wanted. The power to destroy a family, to uproot 2 teenage girls from the only home they'd ever known, to expose 15 years of deception that would probably end Emma's marriage. I don't know, I said honestly. I need time to think about all of this. Sarah, please, whatever you decide, remember that Lily and Rose don't know any of this. This is the only home they've ever known. They've never lived anywhere else. I know that. And Mark, she hesitated, looking ashamed. Mark doesn't know either. He thinks we own the house outright. He's so proud of what we've built, so grateful to Dad for what he thought was just help with a down payment. I stared at her in disbelief. You never told your own husband? How could I? We were newlyweds when we moved in. He was so proud that we had our own house, so grateful to your dad for helping us get started. He thought that's all it was, help with a down payment and maybe the first few mortgage payments. If he finds out that we've never owned our own home, that we've been living off your charity without your knowledge, she shook her head. It would destroy him. He's such a proud man, Sarah. This would kill him. The complexity of the situation was overwhelming. This wasn't just about Emma and me anymore. It was about Mark, who'd been unknowingly living a lie for 15 years. It was about Lily and Rose, who might lose the only home they'd ever known. It was about 15 years of family history built on a foundation of deception. But it was also about me, about the sister who'd been told she was too dependent, too involved, too much of an emotional parasite to be welcome at family dinners in her own house. I need time, I repeated. I need to figure out what's right here. How much time? I don't know. But Emma, no more lies, no more secrets. Whatever I decide, we're going to handle this honestly from now on. She nodded, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. What are you going to do? I'm going to go home and think. And you're going to go home and figure out how to tell your husband the truth. Sarah, no more lies, Emma. That's non-negotiable. If we're going to fix this family, if there's even a family left to fix, it starts with honesty. As I walked back to my car, I felt the weight of 15 years of deception settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. I was no longer just the rejected sister, the emotional parasite who didn't belong anywhere. I was the owner of a house I'd never known about, holding the key to a family's future in my hands. The question was, what was I going to do with that power? And what kind of person did I want to be when this was all over? 2 weeks passed before Emma called me. 2 weeks of agonizing silence during which I consulted with lawyers, talked to financial advisors, researched property law until my eyes burned, and spent countless hours staring at the deed that had changed everything. I barely slept, barely ate, and threw myself into work with an intensity that had my new colleagues asking if I was feeling all right. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was sitting in my apartment, surrounded by legal documents and trying to figure out what the right thing to do was. Her name appeared on my phone screen, and I stared at it for several rings before answering. "Mark knows," were the first words out of her mouth. No greeting, no preamble. "How did he take it?" "About as well as you'd expect." Her voice sounded exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. "He's been sleeping in the guest room since I told him. He feels like our entire marriage has been built on a lie, which I guess it has been." I felt a pang of sympathy for Mark. Despite everything that had happened, he'd been as much a victim of this deception as I had been. Maybe more so. At least, I'd only recently discovered the truth. He'd been living the lie for 15 years, making decisions and plans based on information that was completely false. "The girls know too," Emma continued. "We had to tell them when Mark started talking about moving out, about finding an apartment until he could figure out what he wanted to do. They're confused and scared, and they keep asking if they're going to have to change schools." "I'm sorry, Emma. I never wanted any of this to hurt the girls. I know you didn't. This is all my fault. All of it." Her voice broke. "Can we meet, please? I think there's something you need to see." We met at a coffee shop downtown, the same one where we'd met countless times over the years to plan birthday parties for the girls or coordinate family events. Neutral territory, but laden with memories of better times. Emma looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. She brought with her a thick manila folder that she slid across the small table to me with shaking hands. "What's this?" "Everything. Every receipt, every payment, every improvement we've made to the house. I've been keeping records all along because I guess part of me always knew this day would come." I opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside were 15 years of meticulous financial records, organized chronologically and cross-referenced with frightening precision. Property tax receipts going back to the year they'd moved in. Insurance payment records, utility bills, repair receipts for everything from plumbing fixes to major renovations. The numbers were staggering. "Emma, this is over $300,000. $327,412.63, she said, with the precision of someone who'd calculated the figure obsessively. "That's how much Mark and I have put into your house over the years, not counting the improvements that have added actual value to the property." I studied the documents, trying to process the scope of what I was seeing. New roof, $23,000. Kitchen renovation, $45,000. HVAC system replacement, $18,000. Basement finishing, $32,000. The list went on and on, a catalog of a family's life measured in home improvement receipts. "I also calculated what fair market rent would have been," she continued, sliding another paper across the table. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely control the movement. "For a 4-bedroom house in that neighborhood, based on comparable rentals over the past 15 years, we would have been paying approximately $2,800 per month in rent, adjusted for annual increases. Over 15 years, that comes to just over $500,000. The math was incredible and overwhelming. They'd improved my property by over $300,000, but they'd also lived rent-free in a space worth over $500,000. "What are you trying to tell me, Emma?" "I'm trying to tell you that this situation is complicated for everyone. I'm not asking you to forgive me for lying to you for 15 years. I'm not asking you to forget that I rejected you from our family when you needed us most. But I am asking you to understand that we've invested our entire lives in that house. Our money, our time, our sweat, our memories. Every room has something of us in it." I looked at my sister across the table. She looked older than her 37 years, worn down by years of carrying this secret and the weight of what it had cost our family. "There's something else," she said quietly, reaching into her purse. "I found out why Dad put the house in your name." "What do you mean?" "I went through all of Mom and Dad's papers, the ones I kept after they died. I found something I'd missed before, something that explains everything." She handed me an envelope with my name written in my father's familiar handwriting, the ink slightly faded but still clear. Inside was a letter dated just 2 weeks before the accident that killed him and Mom. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means something terrible has happened to your mother and me, and Emma has finally found the courage to tell you the truth about the house. I want you to know that putting the house in your name was never about favoring one daughter over the other. It wasn't about not trusting Emma or thinking she couldn't handle property ownership. It was about making sure both of my girls would be okay if something happened to us." Emma has Mark and the twins. She has a family to support her, people who depend on her and who she can depend on in return. You, my independent, brilliant, sometimes stubborn younger daughter, have always been more of a lone wolf. I've watched you go through life, determined to do everything yourself, to never ask for help, to never admit when you need support. I worried that if something happened to your mother and me, you'd be truly alone in the world. Not because you don't have people who love you, but because you're too proud to ask for help when you need it. The house was meant to be your insurance policy, but also your anchor. I hoped that someday, when you were ready, you might choose to live there too. I dreamed of Emma and Mark raising their family in one part of the house, while you built your own life in another part. I imagined Sunday dinners, where both of my daughters were home, where my grandchildren grew up knowing that family means taking care of each other. I know Emma will take good care of the house, and I know she'll take good care of you too, even if neither of you realizes you need taking care of. But I wanted you to have something that was truly yours, something that no one could ever take away from you, something that would always be there when you needed it. I should have told you about this arrangement, but I wanted to wait until you finished college and got established in your career. I wanted you to focus on building your own life first, not worry about property management and rental income and all the headaches that come with real estate. I hope by the time you read this, you and Emma have figured out a way to make this work for both of your families. I hope you understand that this was never about money or property or legal ownership. It was about love and making sure that no matter what happened, you'd always have a place where you belonged. I love you both more than words can say. Take care of each other. Dad, tears were streaming down my face by the time I finished reading. Across the table, Emma was crying too. Both of us grieving not just for our parents, but for all the years we'd lost to secrets and misunderstandings. He wanted us to live there together, I whispered. That's what I think too. I think he imagined some kind of multi-generational family situation, maybe with you living in part of the house and us in another part. I thought about all the times over the years when I'd felt like an outsider looking in on Emma's family life. All the times I'd driven home alone after family dinners, wishing I belonged somewhere the way Emma belonged with Mark and the girls. All the Sunday evenings when I'd sat in my small apartment, listening to the silence and wondering what it would be like to have a real family, a real home. I'd had a home all along. I just hadn't known it. Emma, why didn't you ever suggest that I move in? Even if you couldn't tell me I owned the house, why didn't you ever ask if I wanted to live there? She was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with an answer she didn't want to give. Because I was selfish, she finally said. Because I was afraid that if you lived there, you'd figure out the truth. And because, she paused, the words clearly difficult. Because I liked having my own space, my own family, without having to share it. I liked being able to make decisions about the house without having to consult anyone. I liked the feeling of ownership, even though it was fake. Her honesty was brutal but necessary. At least now I knew where I stood. What do you want to happen now? I asked. I want to make this right. I want to find a way for both of our families to be okay. Both of our families? You're still my sister, Sarah. You're still Lily and Rose's aunt. We're still family, even if I've done a terrible job of showing it. Over the next week, we worked with lawyers and financial advisors to figure out a solution that would work for everyone. It wasn't simple and it wasn't perfect, but it was fair. Emma and Mark would purchase the house from me at current market value, approximately $485,000, minus the documented improvements they'd made over the years. They would also pay me a settlement for 15 years of occupancy, but at a rate below market rent, in recognition of the improvements and maintenance they'd provided. The final numbers worked out to Emma and Mark owing me approximately $200,000, which they would finance through a traditional mortgage. For the first time in 15 years, they would actually own their own home. But there was one more condition I insisted on, something that surprised everyone, including myself. I want to build a small apartment above the garage, I told them during one of our planning sessions. Nothing big, just a one-bedroom space with a kitchenette. I want the option to live on the property too, the way Dad envisioned. Emma looked uncertain, and I could see the worry in her eyes. You want to move in? I want the option. I don't know if I'll ever use it, but I want to know that I have a place where I belong, a place where I'm not just a visitor who can be uninvited when it becomes convenient. After several long discussions and a few heated arguments, they agreed. The apartment would be built with my money, on property that would soon be theirs. but with a legal agreement that gave me the right to live there for as long as I wanted. 3 months later, I attended my first family dinner at Emma's house since the day they'd told me I wasn't welcome. The atmosphere was awkward at first, stilted with the weight of everything that had happened. But Lily and Rose seemed genuinely happy to have me back, asking about my job and telling me about school, in the way teenagers do when they're trying to fill uncomfortable silences. Mark was polite, but distant. Our relationship would take time to rebuild. He felt betrayed not just by Emma's deception, but by my sudden appearance as the secret owner of his home. I understood his anger, even if it wasn't entirely fair. "Aunt Sarah," Rose said as we were clearing the dishes, "are you really going to live in the apartment above the garage?" "Maybe someday. Would you like that?" She nodded enthusiastically. "It would be like having you as a neighbor instead of just someone who visits sometimes." Later, as Emma and I stood on the back deck looking at the construction site where my future apartment was taking shape, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Sarah, for all of it. For lying to you for 15 years, for pushing you away when you needed family most, for making you feel like you didn't belong when you've belonged here all along. I'm sorry too," I said, meaning it, for not fighting harder to understand what was happening, for being so ready to believe that I didn't belong, for not asking the right questions sooner. "Do you think we can fix this? Our relationship? Our family?" I looked at the house, her house now, legally and officially, and thought about Dad's letter, about his dream of both his daughters building their lives in the same place, about all the family dinners and holidays and memories we could still make. "I think we can try. But Emma, no more secrets, no more lies. If we're going to be family, we have to be honest family." She nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. "No more secrets. I promise." The apartment over the garage was finished 6 months later. I didn't move in right away. I needed time to adjust to the idea of being so close to family after years of feeling shut out. But I kept a key, and sometimes on Sunday evenings after dinner, I'd go up there and sit on the small balcony, looking out over the yard where Lily and Rose played, listening to the sounds of family life drifting up from the house below. It wasn't the family dynamic any of us had expected, but it was ours. Complicated, imperfect, but honest at last. Emma and Mark were slowly rebuilding their marriage, working through the trust issues that 15 years of deception had created. The girls were adjusting to having their aunt living so close, sometimes coming up to the apartment to do homework, or just to talk about things they didn't want to discuss with their parents. And sometimes, on quiet Sunday evenings, when the light was just right and the girls' laughter echoed across the yard, I could almost hear Dad's voice on the wind, telling me that this was what he'd always wanted. Both his daughters home, both his daughters belonging somewhere, both his daughters taking care of each other the way family should. It had taken us 15 years and nearly losing each other completely to get here, but we'd finally found our way back to being family. Not perfect family, not easy family, but real family, and that was enough.